Hello, everyone, and thanks, Kellie, for joining us to support this Fashion Revolution Week 2020. My name is Valeria Meliado. I'm the fabric researcher and developer for Vivienne Westwood, a ready-to-wear mainline. My job is sourcing materials and making sure that the selection we make has the least impact on people and environment. I'm also co-founder of 7 Sessions and Talk Act, a speaker lead events around topics related to sustainability. Actually, Kellie was one of our speakers for the 6th event about fashion future. Please go and look at our YouTube channel. She was amazing, but we know each other because we've been working in Vivienne Westwood since a while now.
Oh, thanks, Valeria. Hi, everyone. As Valeria said, I'm Kellie Dalton. I'm an advisor to fashion brands specializing in the social and environmental impacts of the industry. I work independently, but I also work as part of a collective called The Right Project. Essentially, I help brands to develop and deliver responsible fashion strategies across a variety of challenges they face. This can be everything from finding their vision and purpose and sustainability to challenges around manufacturing, materials, customer use, end of life, understanding traceability, transparency, carbon footprinting, standards and certifications, and all of that right down to measuring and communicating about impact. I mean, it's not just related to product supply chain, but I work right across business operations. What I am most passionate about, though, is helping people to make sense of what's going on in the industry because it is incredibly complex, and trying to help them to understand their role in it and how they can take steps to make change for the better. At the Right Project, we're working on this special collaborative space to do exactly just that, to share what we've learned so far. So it's launching this summer. It's for everyday people and for industry professionals. So if you are interested, please do get in touch. But as Valeria said, we've been working together at Vivienne Westwood for a while now. More notably, in the last 6 months, we've been reviewing how Vivienne Westwood have been adapting the way that you make clothes over the last few years to reflect this growing urgency for the industry's change, considering the climate crisis. We've also been looking at what you can do to push yourselves to go further and stepping up your ambition.
We have always been great supporters of all the campaigns the Fashion Revolution has been conducting since the collapse of Rana Plaza. Fashion Revolution's main message has always been very simple and powerful. Who made my clothes? They ask us to brands to take public responsibility for the choices they make, and to people to take responsibility for the choices they make when they buy the new clothes. In the last few weeks, Fashion Revolution have been working to highlight how the COVID-19 crisis has impacted the people who make our clothes, and particularly our garment workers in the less developed countries. At Vivienne Westwood, our manufacturing fabric suppliers are predominantly based in Italy. We've been all watching the story since the beginning of March, and we've been working closely to them. We're waiting for them to start to work back again. Of course, it's a challenge from both parts, and we don't really know how the fashion industry is going to look like.
I mean, there's many conversations that are happening around what the fashion industry is going to look like on the other side of this pandemic. To answer it, I just really think that we need to start asking ourselves questions about the big challenges that are in front of us and what we are actually doing about them. You know, are we making too much? Becky Early from the Centre for Circular Design asked a really good question. You know, are we even making products in the right ways for the right things anymore? You know, and why are we buying too much? I read a staggering statistic from the Circularity Gap report that was released this year that says global material consumption has grown to top 100 billion tons annually for the first time ever. You know, can the industry continue on this sort of growth trajectory with finite raw materials? There's this idea that, you know, somehow we need to move away from this growth logic and shift our approach to the economy to more earth-based logic. And for anyone who hasn't had a chance to read it yet, there's a new fashion action research plan called Earth Logic that's been brought out by Kate Fletcher and Matilda Tam. And I'd really encourage everyone to just take a look if you have time. I mean, the UN says that by 2050, the equivalent of almost 3 planets worth of resources could be required to sustain our current lifestyles given population growth. And when you think about that, it's really staggering. You know, the fashion industry, yeah, definitely, it's only one part of those lifestyles, but it's a very significant part. And I mean, in the UK landscape, and I will say this is up until recent months, the industry alone has been estimated being worth 32.5 billion to the UK economy. You know, it contributes to livelihoods, communities and cultures. But I don't think that that's enough to offset the social and environmental damage that comes with the current way the industry operates. And if anything, I think that what the coronavirus has shown us is that just being prepared, and also the importance of every single person and every single business playing their part in the face of dealing with global crises. I mean, the coronavirus, the World Economic Forum every year release their list of global risks. In January this year, the report was published, and it had infectious diseases in the top 10 risks likely to have a catastrophic global impact. And whatever people think about, whether the coronavirus was a black swan, an unexpected event that had a low probability of happening, or as Michelle Wooker put it in The Economist, it was a grey rhino that was coming straight at us. What we do know are the other risks that are on that report, those grey rhinos that are coming straight at us. And the top 5 global risks in terms of likelihood of them occurring were all related to the environment. They're extreme weather, climate action failure, natural disasters, biodiversity loss, and human-made environmental disasters. The industry has come on a lot. The awareness about sustainability is really, really high. But in short, we're definitely not doing enough. There's a huge amount of work that has to be done. The Global Fashion Agenda, in partnership with Boston Consulting Group, they produced a report called The Pulse of the Fashion Industry. And I mean, again, I encourage everybody to just look it up to get a good overview of what's happening in the industry. They did this extensive piece of research around industry progress, and the overriding conclusion that they came to, is that if the industry doesn't implement these changes at a faster rate, it will not be able to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals or meet the Paris Agreements. Their chief sustainability officer was quoted as saying, yes, the industry is improving definitely on sustainability, but the problem is that the pace of change is slowing down while the industry is growing between 4 to 5% every year. So if we just think about that in terms of actual consumption, by 2030, it's predicted that the global apparel consumption will rise 63% from 62 million tons today to 102 million tons. So that's the equivalent of 500 billion t-shirts annually being poured into the earth. I mean, it is really staggering when you think about it. But then we have to kind of think about, wait, the fashion industry has paused and stalled right now. So is that going to make a difference on the other side? And if it does make a difference, how is everybody's livelihood who's working within the industry going to be affected? I mean, one clear thing that comes out of the report is that 40% of brands in the industry haven't even started doing the basics beyond legal compliance around sustainability. And the rest of the 60%, the main bulk of the activity of moving forward in the last year has been small to medium-sized brands, and large brands are the ones who the progress has stalled with the most. And my question just is, who are this 40%? How can we engage them and point them in the right direction of the most effective industry solutions? Everybody has to start somewhere. Valeria, we share lots of information between us and our network, and we know sustainability isn't a competitive space. I feel like if you're a brand who doesn't know where to start, reach out to an industry professional. There are services that are sort of low cost all the way up to, costing a lot more, but there's definitely ways and means to start off slowly and to be able to build if you haven't done anything at all. And also on the consumer side, if you're curious about the impact of the clothes that you buy, just ask questions. I feel like people will definitely share what they know. At Vivienne Westwood, Valeria, you've been adapting the way that you've been doing business. We just spoke about that over the last number of years. And together we've been working on putting strategies and plans in place and solutions that will help you to reduce the biggest impacts of the brands, but it's a very staggered plan of a year on year, the things that need to be done. What I've been inspired about with working with your teams is the level of passion and proactivity, and there's a real inherent activism right across your brand. And just to give everyone who's listening, some examples of progress to date and where you are going in specific areas. For example, like the Switch to Green campaign, lots of people will be familiar with. It was launched with the British Fashion Council. So 95% of stores, your offices and warehouses are globally are run on green energy, and you're on track for that to be 100% by the end of 2020. On the overconsumption side, everyone will be familiar with Vivienne's ethos of buy less, choose well, and make it last. And you've been educating around overconsumption in that vein, but also internally, you've been minimizing your overproduction. So you've reduced the size of your ready-to-wear collections by 37%. Bags was 55%, and I think shoes was 58%. And that's been over the last maybe 2 to 3 years. You're on track to eliminate virgin plastic from all products by 2021. You've eliminated virgin plastic from all customer packaging already, and you're on track to eliminate virgin plastic from transit packaging by the end of this year. And then also moving away from virgin plastic materials. In other areas, you're moving away from virgin materials kind of at a steady year-on-year rate. So say, for example, in your jewellery collection, 100% of the silver and gold used in your jewellery is recycled. And by 2021, 100% of the brass will be recycled. Supply chain monitoring has been expanded. Traceability work has been stepped up. And now, and you'll talk about this a bit later, Valeria, but the traceability work will start to focus more on cotton, viscose and wool as they're your main materials that you use. And more direct kind of employee related, not so much on supply chain, but, you know, all employees are on green pension funds and there's pay equality for employees. So there's so much work happening. But at the same time, while it's great to kind of step back and acknowledge that there is so much more to be done as the urgency in the industry is getting quite serious now. While we are finalising this roadmap we're working on together to build in your work, we wanted to share, or hope that you'd share, Valeria, some practical steps that Vivienne Westwood have been taking to minimise their social and environmental impact. In the hope that it's going to inspire other industry professionals to start tackling their own impacts if they haven't started already, and then just inspire everyday people to make more informed and positive choices. This year, I mentioned Fashion Revolution are in their 7th year, and they've expanded the remit of their campaign from who made my clothes to what's in my clothes. So we thought it fitting that, Valeria, that you would share some of how you've been adapting your work to reduce the social and environmental impacts of the brand, especially as your area materials is one of the biggest successes the brand has had around sustainability to date. I mean, data from your latest collection shows that 65% of your fabrics are classed as sustainable, and that figure would actually increase to 85% if you include cruelty-free and non-used wool. It's been such an impressive switch from more conventional fabrics to sustainable fabrics. So it'd be brilliant if you could give us just an overview of what that 85% of materials is, and then also some advice on your process of how you switched to more sustainable alternatives.
Yes, so before starting to explain how we switch from non-sustainable to sustainable material, I think it's important to understand the current fabric situation and starting from the basic. So we have 4 big raw material categories. We have plant-based, animal-based, man-made fibers, and synthetic fibers. So the preferred fiber and material market report in 2019 by Textile Exchange said we have been double the number of meters of fabrics we have been producing in the last 20 years, and we're going to reach 145 million meters of fabrics by 2030. So that make the textile industry comparable to the automobile industry in terms of CO2 emissions. And another interesting fact is that the 2 fabrics that we produce mostly are cotton and polyester, the most unfortunately unsustainable one in their raw material category. So polyester, it needed a lot of energy to be produced, and that means a lot of CO2 emissions in atmosphere, and cotton is the dirtiest. It has been called the dirtiest crop because due to the heavy use of water and pesticides in their production. Even leather has a very important impact in the market production of fabrics. We actually produce every year 7 million meters of leather, starting from the skin of 1 billion of animals. So that's incredible. What is important to understand is that any single material that I mentioned has a unique life cycle with different steps, and they require different use of water, carbon emissions. We need to consider the health and the lifestyle of the workers inside the company. So I'm sure, Kellie, you can give some states. I remember we've been discussing about that in one of our meetings.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about sustainability is that there's always a lot of back and forth about the data and the accuracy of it, but wherever the number actually lands, those numbers are always going to be really big. So, for example, on water consumption, there was the State of the Apparel Sector 2015 special report on water. They called out that those 5 trillion litres of water are used for fabric dyeing alone every year. And so that's the equivalent of 2 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. And on the carbon emissions, Valeria, you gave a statistic before, and there has been, again, some debate on the percentage of global emissions, but the International the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has calculated that the fashion industry produces 10% of global carbon dioxide emissions every year, and it is thought that that's going to surge by 50% by 2030 if we stay on that current trajectory of consumption. And even like land use, you mentioned as well, an extra 115 million hectares of land are going to be used for increased fibre production. There's, biodiversity risk. 150 million trees are being logged every year to turn into man-made cellulosic fabric, whereas 80% of land-based biodiversity is reliant on forests. So you can see how complex it is and how much the impacts are really coming through nature and just sort of ravaging it in its wake. Aside from all of the environmental challenges and the big numbers around that, there's also on the social side, there's some really intense statistics around how people are treated in global supply chains. The Walk Free Foundation brought out a report with the Global Slavery Index, and they were looking at the prevalence of modern slavery in garment supply chains. And they have calculated that $127 billion worth of garments are at risk of including modern slavery in their supply chains, and they're imported into annual imports into the G20 countries, which actually make up 80% of all world trade in the area. Even on the wages side of things, minimum wages in the industry are half of what's considered to be a living wage. The more you kind of get into research in this area, the more a kind of overwhelming and complex it can become. But the important thing is not to get bogged down too much in that, because there are solutions that are coming thick and fast.
What we've been doing so far in Vivienne Westwood, definitely, I can say that the last season is the most successful season. We have a lot to do still. I'm not saying we are perfect. We are definitely not. We are working a lot on material still. What we reached the 65%, as you said, Kellie, is eco fabric right now, and we can consider 85% of our material sustainable if we also include mulesin-free wool and sustainable viscose. We moved for 52% to 85%. The woolen collection this season is mulesin-free. 98% of our cotton jersey is organic. We managed to turn 84% of our cotton over all categories in ready-to-wear mainline collection organic or recycled. One of the best achievements is also making sure that at least half of our viscose in collection is responsibly sourced, and 100% of our lining viscose is responsibly sourced. And last but not least, we actually almost eliminated virgin synthetic fiber from our ready-to-wear mainline, and we reached 2% this season, but we are aiming to not have any more virgin synthetic fibers in the next seasons.
I know from working together and our conversations back and forth that you're constantly interrogating the benefit of one fabric over another, or the social and environmental impact of one fibre over another. When it comes to making the final decision, how do you know what to choose given all of the information that you have at your disposal?
So, as I said, there is no a better, we can say there is a better fabric than another one. There is not a absolutely right and clear choice. It's more about trade-off. It's more about compromise. So hemp, for example, is, at the moment, I believe is one of the most sustainable fabric we have, but it doesn't perform as well as cotton or viscose. Yeah, you definitely can source responsibly viscose, but you need to think also about the chemical used to make viscose. Recycled polyester is amazing fabric. You finally don't have to make new fabric available. You don't have to make new fabric because you are reusing fabrics that already exist. But it's also true that you need to consider the microfiber problem. Start from the big numbers. So we analyze which were the most important raw material categories in our collection. And we found out that cotton, wool, and viscose were the fabric that we were selling more. So that means that we needed to swap cotton, conventional cotton in sustainable cotton, conventional viscose in sustainable viscose, and the same for wool. The second suggestion I can give is use all the tools you have available. I would say use an orchestra, Italian way. Use an orchestra of tools. So any tool you have. So that means life cycle assessment, certifications, supplier visit, third part audits. So anything you find in the market right now that can help you, use it. That will help you to lower down the risk to make the wrong choice. The third suggestion I can give is develop your own tool. So yeah, you use the tools that are available outside, but use your own tool that suits much better your needs. We actually developed a tool with Kellie form. Kellie helped us to make it a bit more complete, where we ask several questions to supplier to assess the state of the supplier, the commitment of the supplier in terms of sustainability. That help also to understand if there is one supplier that's actually improving quite quickly and one supplier that is stuck in their position and is not making improvement. And also ask as many questions as you can. Don't stop at the first answer. And if your supplier doesn't give you answers, just make sure that he understands that that's very important for you and it's a win-win game. The fourth thing I can say is know your supplier. In Vivienne Westwood, we've been working with suppliers that we built a trustful relationship with. So that means go and visit the supplier. We went to visit the suppliers with all the design team. We spent all day together. We're seeing the factory. We know the people. So build trustful relationship with them, because that's the strategy and the only way to have successful collaboration, which is my fifth tip. So work together with your supplier, and that's the way how you can improve and make a fabric better. If your supplier is not able to give you the answers you need, you can also use external tools such as Oritane. Kellie knows Oritane very well as well. It's a company that can trace your product, particularly cotton and leather, using a scientific approach. So they can tell you where the cotton is coming from. It can be Uzbekistan, can be US, and if it's genetically modified. So in this way, you can prove that what your supplier is saying is correct. You can also preserve your reputation if you decide to become more transparent to your consumer. Viscose has been called artificial silk, so it's very beautiful fabric, draped very well, but has got also some downside. It comes from wood pulp, so you need to make sure that the wood pulp is not coming from the endangered and protect forests, but it's coming from well-managed forests. And also use a lot of chemicals, so you need to make sure that your supplier has some certifications that show that it's actually not using hazardous chemicals and is keeping them inside their own system and not releasing outside in the water, because that can impact the life of the people that live close by, even the workers inside. There was a really nice article in September 2019 in Vogue Australia that was saying if you're wearing viscose right now, most likely your viscose is coming from the Amazon forest. And I decided to go and visit the Amazon forest last Christmas. And it will be banal to say that was the most amazing trip in my life, but definitely changed myself, changed the way how I do my job and my commitment to avoid that this is going to happen. And I'm so grateful to work in a company that have the same vision. In fact, we are part of the Canopy Planet program, so we are committed to reduce as much as possible any kind of materials that comes from protect forest. And the only way how we do that is making sure that they have a certification, which is called Forest Stewardship Council, FSC.
I feel like it's become quite a controversial fabric over the last while is cotton. I mean, I know that we discuss a lot about water use to do with cotton. Do you want to tell us a bit about what your stance internally is on water to do with cotton and how you're trying to shift away from using it a bit?
Yeah, actually, Vivienne is very keen on this. She wants to reduce as much as possible the use of cotton due to the heavy use of water, as you were saying, Kellie, and pesticide. And we use over 3,000 liters of water to make a pair of jeans, and we use over 2,000 liters of water to make a T-shirt. So that's why we're trying to use alternative solution to cotton. For example, we with our supplier Berto, our denim line now use 65% of recycled cotton. In this way, we reduce by 70% the water use, by 85% the chemical use, and by 60% the CO2 emissions. Organic cotton is another good alternative. There is a lot going on behind organic cotton. Is it true that is it the right choice? Is it no? I'm sure, Kellie, you can give some suggestions regarding this. We've been discussing a lot.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I feel like cotton has become quite a controversial topic, and often you'll hear cotton discussed as everything thrown in together. So organic cotton will be conflated with conventional cotton. But what's really important to do is traceability is of the utmost importance when it comes to cotton, because in different areas, for example, like there'll be different levels of water use because people farm in different ways. So some might use drip irrigation, but some might use flood irrigation, and that will use more water. Or, you know, organic cotton might be predominantly rain fed, but it might be mixed how water is used. So rather than just thinking, oh, cotton uses lots of water, it's like, okay, yes, but. So it's really trying to trace your cotton supply chains right back to source. I mean, my preference is always for organic because of the, you know, no pesticides, herbicides. Sorry, I should say synthetic herbicides, pesticides, insecticides are used in the cultivation of organic cotton, certified organic cotton, I would recommend. And then also, just the economic benefits for smallholder farmers. You know, farmers do receive a premium for their raw material product, which helps them to have more discretionary income for, I mean, basic amenities in life, you know, like schooling their children or healthcare and things that we would take for granted. So my preference definitely is always for certified organic cotton, but I would encourage people to do their own research and trace back to source to find out what they feel is best. Eco Textile News have produced a report on cotton. I think it's called the Inside Guide to Cotton and Sustainability. It's written by Simon Frenio, who is an excellent cotton expert who's worked in the field for 25 years, and it's a very balanced view of cotton. It's also really interesting. It gives a bit about the history of the industry and gives the context, but it talks specifically about these issues around you can't just give a blanket figure for water, or you can't just give a blanket figure for you know, deaths from pesticide use. You have to look at the local context. If people are interested though in trying to source more organic cotton or trying to buy more organic cotton, the main certifications to look out for is the Global Organic Textile Standard, which is GOTS certification, it's called. You have Soil Association, then you also have the Textile Exchange, and the OCS, it's the Organic Cotton Standard. You'll have Fair Trade Textile Standard, which now includes some environmental elements as well. There's a few others, Cotton Made in Africa, SEMA, and there's a brand new regenerative organic certified standard. So quite fragmented in terms of standards and certifications, but nonetheless, there's lots of solutions being looked at, but I would always favour organic.
Hemp is the favorite fabric of Vivienne, and I feel comfortable to say that hemp is one of the most amazing fabric you can find right now, and it can be even considered very sustainable. The crazy thing related to hemp is that we didn't see so much hemp before because due to the prohibition of the weed. So since the weed became legalized in US, we started back again to see hemp everywhere in materials, in fabrics. So hemp is not simply a sustainable fabric because it uses less water, it doesn't use pesticides, it grows spontaneously, but it's also very good for your health. It's breathable, it's antibacterial, it's hypoallergenic, so it's everything inside one crop. We have one of our supplier of hemp is an Italian supplier. He actually has a big field of hemp in the north center of Italy. We went to visit him, his factory, a lot of times, but we actually didn't manage to go and visit the field. But we are planning to do that as soon as the situation, of course, will end.
You've been to visit flax suppliers, though, for your linen.
Yes, I did. I actually did last year, and it was another great experience as well. Linen is another amazing fabric that I suggest you look for that as well. It's breathable, it's good for winter, good for summer, and you don't have any waste. You can use everything from the flax plant. I went to visit a linen field in Belgium thanks to the European Confederation of Flax and Hemp. They invited me, and Tamsin Blanchard was actually with me there, and she wrote a beautiful article on Holland Corner in the Making Good edition. So I suggest if you want to know much more about linen, go and read this article because it will say everything.
Do you want to just give us one quick then overview of wool as well that you mentioned, that you switched a lot of your wool to cruelty-free wool, just to explain to people what that actually means?
Yes, during the autumn months in Australia, flies lay eggs in the folds of the sheepskin, and the maggots can eat the sheep alive. To prevent this so-called fly strike, Australian ranchers perform a barbaric procedure called mulesing, in which they force the sheep onto their backs. They restrain their legs between metal bars, and often without any painkillers, they cut huge chunks of skin away from the animal's backside. And this is terrible, painful. Try to understand where the wool is coming from, ask the origin of the wool, and make sure through your supplier that they don't use this procedure, which is called mulesing. So you need to look for mulesing-free wool.
We've discussed a lot about your process and got a really good insight to how you go about switching materials, and then also the types of materials and the issues to look out for. Could you sum up for us just what your top tips are for industry professionals so everyone can just take note and go off and do those things as soon as they watch the video?
Okay, so first thing was start with the big numbers. So analyze what is in your collection and find out which are the more important raw materials categories. Then use our orchestral tools, use all the tools available. Third, develop your own tool. For example, a form, questions. Fourth, know your suppliers. And fifth, make successful collaboration with them.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's that thing of just adapting the tools that are out there. Like you said, create your own ones and adapt what you can to suit your own brand and the situation that you're in right now. Some people will be at the beginning of the basics, but some people will be far more advanced. So I did read a really good quote in the last edition of Eco Textile News from the CEO of Blue Sign Technologies. For people who aren't familiar with them, they're a responsible chemical management company. But they said people and companies need to source products like they're living next door to the suppliers. And I feel like that this should go for every single fashion stakeholder. If you're making product, if you're selling product, if you're promoting product, you need to think like this. What would you do, or what would you want to see if you were living next door to your supplier? What standard would you expect? For anyone who does want to do more in-depth research after this video, I have loads of recommendations on my website for what people can read, what they can watch, listen to, and accounts to follow across a wide range of topics, from materials to labour standards, regenerative agriculture, circularity, systems change, government policy. There's tons of stuff on there to get you going. Also, the most recent edition of Eco Textile News is free for anyone who wants to access it. So I'd really encourage industry people who aren't familiar with that publication to go on there and download it and have a quick look. I mean, if I take my industry hat off and just think about it in my day-to-day life, I feel it's just really about trying to embrace, if you're in a situation that where you can, but just this idea of like buying less, choosing well, and just making it last. That ethos and the idea of also that loved clothes last. I saw this brilliant quote as well on Future Dust from Patagonia that says, let's behave like owners and not consumers, and repair rather than inflict something new on the planet if we don't truly need it. I think that this is one of the most difficult but absolutely most important mindset shifts that we need to see with everyone globally. For everyday people, and actually, just all of us, my top tips are right now, if this is not something that you're familiar with doing, but just check the care label on your clothes and see what you are wearing, like what material it is. Search for any other information, how you care for it properly, and then have a look online and see, where this material comes from, how it's processed. And once you go down that rabbit hole of information, it can feel kind of really empowering nearly to have additional information and control over what you are wearing and buying in your day-to-day life. The other basic one, is just wear and care for clothes that you already own. Then, other obvious ones as well as repair your clothes. You can rent them now, swap them, share them. Gift hand-me-downs is something that we don't really do as practice anymore. And then obviously the one that people do a lot is to donate. I would say yes, definitely donate, but I would ask questions of wherever you're donating it to about where those clothes end up after you donate, because often they can end up in textile landfills and secondary markets. And people want to know a bit more about that. Check out the OR Foundation, and they're doing amazing work in Ghana around that, because at the end of the day, if we're throwing something away, there is no away really. It just ends up somewhere else. Check out Mend Assembly for repairing, Global Fashion Exchange for swapping, for sharing the new wardrobe, for renting. There's tons of organizations you can rent from, but On Loan is one in particular that I'd look at. Other tips is just, only buy what you need, because we are, as you heard, consumption is on the rise. And in some countries, 40% of purchased clothing will never be used. So if you think about that, consumption is going to hit 102 million tons by 2030. That will be 50 million tons of clothes lying around unused that we paid money for. So just ask yourself if you really need it. And then when you are buying new, obviously buy sustainable products. Always consider quality over quantity and support brands that are doing work in the area. Other tips, just start asking questions right now of every brand that you buy clothes from. Who made your clothes, in what country, what's in them, what materials. and just tell brands what you want. I've been in brand meetings when decisions are getting made about what to work on in sustainability, and not that it's that simplistic, but people in the room have said, what are customers asking for? So this works, please ask the questions. Because it is such a complex area and there's so much information to take in, I encourage everyone just not to get too bogged down on certain points, because you will never find the perfect sustainable product. You'll never find the perfect sustainable solution. As Valeria said earlier, there's always just trade-offs. So you can always only go on the most up-to-date information you have right now, and know that eventually that will change. Because the really exciting thing about sustainability that we should all be very optimistic about is that it's changing every day. There's new reports, new solutions, new technologies, new products, new services. And so just go with what you know for right now, and in time things will change, and that's okay. Share information that you have, but try not to shame people if they are buying things or wearing them in a way that you wouldn't, just because not everyone is in a position to take action right now. And this is when I check myself on a lot, because I know lots of things and I want to sort of like give all my information to the world, but you have to kind of just go easy on people in some ways. Last couple ones, just keep researching and pushing for change. We do have the power to make a change. In the global fashion industry, Pulse of the Fashion Industry, Global Fashion Agenda Pulse of the Fashion Industry report that I mentioned earlier, a piece of research was done within that where they surveyed, I think it was around 3,000 respondents about where they were spending their money on clothing, and more than a third reported that they had switched from their preferred brand to a brand who had more responsible practices. So this is amazing. You're seeing where's the money going. The money is shifting. So let's keep that momentum going. And the last tip, of course, is just to follow fashion revolution, and when you're in a position to, just remember to buy less, choose well, and make it last. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Kellie. And thank you, Fashion Revolution, for inviting us to be part of this Fashion Revolution Week. Please get in contact with us if you have any questions, suggestions. You can find Kellie in her website. You can look for me in Instagram, any social media. And I think it will be good to finish with a phrase from Vivienne. First, go and check even Vivienne's website, theclimaterevolution.co.uk. And remember all the time that what's good for the planet is good for the economy as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Valeria.